Hey guys, tonight we're adrift on a vast, inky ocean under a canopy of 1,000,000 glittering diamonds. You feel the gentle rocking of the outrigger beneath you, the salt spray kissing your face, and the whisper of the wind filling the woven sails above. You're navigating by the stars, an ancient mariner charting a course across the Pacific. And let's be honest, without a solid understanding of these celestial maps, you probably won't survive this trip. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where in the world our stargazers are tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint upwards, trying to decipher the secrets held within the constellations. These aren't just pretty lights, mind you. For the Polynesian peoples, the master navigators of the Pacific, these stars were roadmaps, calendars, and spiritual guides all rolled into one shimmering package. You rely on them, completely and utterly. You watch the Southern Cross, a familiar friend, dip lower towards the horizon, signaling the changing seasons. You feel the subtle shift in the ocean currents as the trade winds begin to pick up. The ancient seafarers, whose knowledge you now share, understood these signs intimately. They knew that the stars were more than just distant suns, they were living entities, connected to the land, the sea, and the very fabric of their existence. You might find it a bit odd that a culture so grounded in the practical realities of seafaring also imbued the stars with such deep spiritual significance. But for them, there was no real separation. Navigation wasn't just a skill, it was a sacred act, a dance with the cosmos. Historians still argue whether this connection stemmed from a deep-seated fear of the unknown or a profound respect for the natural world, but one thing is clear, the stars shaped their worldview. You imagine the generations of navigators who came before you, memorizing the positions of hundreds of stars, their movements relative to each other, and their relationship to the islands scattered across the vast ocean. It wasn't enough to simply know where a star was, you also had to understand its mana, its power and influence. Different stars were associated with different deities, different aspects of nature, and different stages of life. Knowing these associations was crucial for a successful voyage. Think of it like knowing all the lyrics to your favorite song, but if that song controlled the weather. You shiver, not entirely from the cool night air. You remember hearing the stories of how navigators could predict weather patterns based on the appearance of certain stars. A hazy ring around a particular star, for example, might indicate an impending storm. Or how the brightness of a star could be used to gauge distance, the brighter the star, the closer you were to land. Imagine the pressure. You're essentially betting your life, and the lives of everyone on board, on your ability to read the celestial tea leaves. You check the position of Hercules, the Zenith Star. It's almost directly overhead. Perfect. That means you're right on course. It also tells you it's around midnight. Time flies when you're staring into the infinite abyss, right? This star, for many Polynesian cultures, marked the highest point of the celestial sphere, representing the pinnacle of knowledge and achievement. It's kind of like that feeling you get when you finally finish a really difficult puzzle, except, the puzzle is the entire ocean. You glance over at your fellow sailors. They're quiet, focused, their faces illuminated by the faint starlight. You know that they're just as reliant on the stars as you are. They, too, have spent years learning the ancient art of celestial navigation. And let's be honest, you're glad they're here, because trying to remember all those constellations on your own would be a nightmare. Now, here's a quirky bit of trivia: some Polynesian cultures actually used birds as navigational aids. They would release birds from the canoe and observe their flight patterns. The direction the bird flew would often indicate the location of land. Talk about avian GPS. It's a fascinating example of how closely these cultures were attuned to the natural world, using every available resource to aid them in their voyages. Some scholars argue that this reliance on birds suggests that Polynesian navigation was not solely dependent on the stars, but also involved a sophisticated understanding of animal behavior and environmental cues. You pull out a small, intricately carved wooden chart. It's a mat-on, a stick chart used by navigators in the Marshall Islands. These weren't maps in the traditional sense. They depicted wave patterns, currents, and the relative positions of islands. The sticks represented wave swells, and the shells indicated the location of islands. It's a three-dimensional representation of the ocean's energy, a testament to the ingenuity of these seafaring peoples. You think about the sheer audacity of these voyages. Sailing thousands of miles across the open ocean, with nothing but the stars, the waves, and their own wits to guide them. It's humbling, to say the least. Imagine trying to explain this to someone today, someone who relies on GPS and satellite imagery. You'd probably get some blank stares and polite nods. You check the position of Macaulay, the Pleiades constellation. Its appearance signals the start of the Hawaiian New Year, a time of feasting and celebration. The rising of the Pleiades was also a cue for planting crops, a reminder of the interconnectedness between the celestial and terrestrial realms. It's a subtle reminder that even on the vast ocean, your life is ruled by the rhythms of the year. Now, let's drop a little historical fact on you. Polynesian voyaging wasn't just a one-way street. They didn't just settle islands and stay put. They actively explored, traded, and maintained contact with different island groups. This inter-island communication was crucial for the exchange of knowledge, resources, and even genes. Think of them as the ancient internet, connecting the dots across the Pacific. You feel a slight tremor in the boat. The wind has picked up, and the waves are getting a bit choppier. You adjust the sail, using all your strength to keep the outrigger steady. You glance at the stars again, reconfirming your course. The stars are your friends, but the sea is a moody god. A single rogue wave and it's all over. Here's a light joke to help you take your mind off that last thought. Why did the navigator bring a ladder on his boat? Because he wanted to reach the high seas. You notice a faint glow on the horizon. Land. Finally. You feel a wave of relief wash over you. You've made it. You've successfully navigated by the stars, just like your ancestors did. You might even survive after all. As the sun begins to rise, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for the knowledge that has been passed down through generations. The stars have guided you, protected you, and connected you to something larger than yourself. And with that thought, you feel a sense of deep peace. You close your eyes, and the soft rocking of the boat lulls you into a gentle sleep. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's get comfy. Maybe grab a cup of chamomile tea. We're about to embark on a journey, not through space, but through how other people used to navigate space. Before the days of satellites and that nagging little voice on your phone telling you to recalculate, people actually had to think about where they were going. Can you imagine? You trudge along a dusty, sun-baked road in 16th century Europe. The year is 1522. You're a merchant, maybe, or a pilgrim. Or perhaps you're just very lost. Your only guide is a crudely drawn map, probably inaccurate, and the sun, which is currently blazing down on your head with the relentless fury of 1,000 tiny suns. You glance at the map again. It resembles a child's drawing more than a useful navigational tool. You squint, trying to decipher the squiggles and the faded ink. Are those supposed to be mountains? Or particularly enthusiastic earthworms? Now, historically speaking, European navigation at this time relied heavily on instruments like the compass and the astrolabe. The compass, of course, pointed north, which was helpful, and the astrolabe, well, the astrolabe was supposed to help you determine your latitude by measuring the angle of the sun or stars. Supposed to. In reality, using an astrolabe on a rocking ship while battling seasickness was a bit like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster blindfolded. Good luck with that. Think about it, you're on a wooden ship, creaking and groaning its way across the Atlantic. Waves crash over the deck, soaking you to the bone. You're trying to hold this delicate brass instrument steady, all while attempting to figure out which star is which and doing mental trigonometry. All you really want to do is curl up in a ball and dream of dry land and maybe a large plate of cheese. And the accuracy? Let's just say pinpoint precision wasn't exactly the norm. You could easily be off by hundreds of miles. And here's a little quirky tidbit for you. Did you know that sailors often used to believe that throwing urine at a thunderstorm would ward off lightning? Yeah, I'm not sure where that one came from either, but desperate times, I guess, call for desperate measures. Just, maybe don't try that one at home. Or at sea. Historians still argue whether the reliance on instruments alone hindered European navigators' ability to truly understand the oceans and their currents. They had the tools, but perhaps they lacked the deep, intuitive connection to the environment that other cultures possessed. It's like having a fancy calculator but forgetting how to do basic arithmetic. Sure, you can crunch the numbers, but do you really understand what you're doing? Now, let's zoom out a bit and hop across the globe. Forget the dusty roads and creaky ships. Picture yourself instead on a sleek, outrigger canoe, gliding effortlessly across the turquoise waters of the Pacific. The year is, well, it could be almost any year for centuries, because Polynesian navigation was a remarkably stable and consistent practice. You are a Polynesian navigator, and the ocean is your home. Here, the tools are different. You don't have brass instruments or complicated charts. Your map is the stars, the waves, the wind, the birds, the very feel of the water against your skin. You're not just navigating on the ocean, you're navigating with it. You are part of the landscape. One mainstream historical fact that is quite striking is that Polynesian navigators were able to settle islands thousands of miles apart, often deliberately sailing against prevailing winds and currents. This wasn't accidental drift, this was intentional, planned exploration and settlement. They did this without the aid of metal tools or written language. Think about that for a moment. They crossed vast stretches of ocean, found tiny specks of land in a seemingly endless expanse of water, and then found their way back again. And they did it all using knowledge passed down through generations, knowledge encoded in stories, songs, and intricate mental maps. It was truly impressive. Their canoes, by the way, were masterpieces of engineering. They were stable, seaworthy, and designed for long voyages. And the navigators themselves were masters of observation. They could read the subtle signs of the ocean, the direction of the swells, the color of the water, the presence of seabirds, even the types of seaweed that clung to the hulls of their canoes. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Polynesian navigators used something called wave piloting. It involved learning to recognize the patterns of ocean swells that were refracted around islands hundreds of miles away, like feeling for a pebble in the dark. Imagine the concentration required. It's kind of like feeling a faint echo of land across the vast ocean. Historians still argue whether the Polynesian navigational system was purely empirical or if it also involved a spiritual or metaphysical dimension. Did they simply observe and record, or did they also tap into a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all things? I think that is the fun part. It's nice when we don't have it all figured out. Consider this: you are lying on the deck of your canoe, gazing up at the night sky. The stars are your guide, but they are also so much more. They are your ancestors, your gods, your story. Each star has a name, a history, a place in the intricate web of Polynesian cosmology. You know where you are, not just in terms of latitude and longitude, but in terms of your place in the universe. Now, let's circle back to Europe for a moment. You're back on that dusty road, still squinting at your map. The sun is starting to dip below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows. You're tired, thirsty, and starting to wonder if you'll ever reach your destination. You pull out your compass, check your map again, and trudge onward, hoping for the best. European navigation, despite its limitations, did eventually lead to the exploration and mapping of the globe. The sextant, a more accurate instrument for measuring the angle of stars, was developed, and improved maps were created. But for a long time, they were making educated guesses. And a quirky fact, sailors often believed that whistling could summon the wind. This was not only superstitious, but also annoying for everyone else on board. Imagine being stuck on a small ship with someone constantly whistling trying to get a little bit of wind. Historians still argue whether the European focus on quantifiable data and scientific instruments ultimately led to a more objective understanding of the world, or whether it detached them from a more holistic and intuitive way of knowing. Did their tools help them see more clearly, or did they blind them to other ways of seeing? You see, both European and Polynesian navigation were effective in their own ways. European navigation, with its reliance on instruments and mathematical calculations, allowed for the precise mapping of coastlines and the development of accurate charts. It was about conquering the ocean, about measuring and controlling it. It was often a more top-down, theoretical approach. Polynesian navigation, on the other hand, was about living in harmony with the ocean, about understanding its rhythms and flows. It was a more bottom-up, experiential approach. It relied on deep knowledge, acute observation, and a spiritual connection to the environment. There was an element of respect there, too. Perhaps the biggest difference, though, lies in the relationship to the unknown. For European navigators, the unknown was something to be feared, something to be conquered. They craved precision and certainty, and they used their instruments to try to eliminate the element of risk. It was about filling in the gaps on the map, about bringing the world under their control. For Polynesian navigators, the unknown was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. They understood that the ocean was vast and unpredictable, and they accepted that there would always be things they couldn't know. They trusted their instincts, their knowledge, and their connection to the environment to guide them through the uncharted waters. And, honestly, there are some days where I wish I could navigate my life with that same trust. That's the end. Sweet dreams, friend. Alright, settle in, friend. Get comfy. Maybe grab a warm mug of something, because we're about to embark on a journey across the vast, inky ocean, guided only by the whispers of the stars. We're going to delve into the heart of the Polynesian star compass, a celestial map so intricate and intuitive, it makes your GPS look like a toddler's crayon drawing. Imagine yourself adrift, not in a metaphorical existential crisis sort of way, though hey, no judgment if you are, but literally adrift. No land in sight, just the rhythmic lull of the waves beneath your outrigger canoe and the endless, shimmering expanse above. Sounds a bit terrifying, right? But for the ancient Polynesians, this wasn't a nightmare. It was home. Their playground. Their superhighway. And the star compass was their trusty, celestial road map. You feel the gentle rocking of the canoe, the spray of salt water on your face. The air is thick with the scent of the ocean and the faint aroma of, is that someone grilling fish on another island, miles and miles away? Probably just your imagination, fueled by the hunger you always seem to have when out at sea. Look up. Really look up. The sky is a tapestry woven with a million tiny lights, each one a sun in its own right. It's overwhelming, isn't it? A chaotic jumble of glittering pinpricks. But the Polynesians weren't intimidated. They saw order in the chaos, patterns in the seemingly random distribution of stars. They didn't just see the stars, they knew them. Intimately. Like old friends. Now, before you start thinking that they were just lucky guessers who happened to stumble upon new islands, kind of like that one time you accidentally found a $20 bill in your old jeans, let's get one thing straight. Polynesian navigation was a highly sophisticated science, passed down through generations of master navigators. These weren't just casual stargazers, they were highly trained professionals. Think of them as celestial cartographers, marine meteorologists, and master mariners all rolled into one incredibly skilled package. And they were good. Really good. Like, find an island the size of a postage stamp in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, good. And, speaking of stamps, you know, the first adhesive postage stamps were actually created in 1840. A fun fact for your next awkward silence at a party. You're welcome. So, how did they do it? How did they manage to navigate thousands of miles across open ocean with no instruments, no maps, well, basically nothing but their knowledge, their canoes, and the stars? That's where the star compass comes in. The star compass isn't a physical object, not like a magnetic compass you might find in a museum. It's more of a mental framework, a system of reference points and pathways encoded in the navigator's mind. Imagine a circle divided into equal segments, each one representing a specific direction. These directions are not just north, south, east, and west, but also points in between, named after the rising and setting points of particular stars. For example, there's Ko'olau, the direction from which the northeast trade winds blow. Then there's Hema, the southern direction. Each of these directions is associated with a specific star or constellation. You might hear the navigator whisper the name of Hkli, Arcturus, a bright star near the zenith. By knowing which stars rise and set in which direction, and by understanding the relationships between these stars, the navigator can maintain a remarkably accurate course. You can almost feel the weight of that knowledge, passed down through generations, a living library held within the mind of the navigator. He isn't just seeing the stars, he's reading them, interpreting their messages, understanding their celestial dance. Interestingly, some researchers believe that ancient Polynesian navigators might have also used a type of stick chart to aid their journeys. These charts, made from woven fibers and shells, depicted wave patterns and swell directions, serving as tactile maps of the ocean's surface. Whether these charts were primarily mnemonic devices or actual navigational tools is a matter of ongoing discussion. Historians still argue whether they were a widespread practice or more localized to certain islands. But the stars weren't the only tool in the navigator's arsenal. They were also masters of reading the ocean itself. The color of the water, the movement of the waves, the presence of seabirds, even the taste of the wind, all of these provided clues about their location and the proximity of land. Think about it, you're out there in the middle of the ocean, and a seabird suddenly appears. Where did it come from? Where is it going? Is it flying towards land? Is it heading back out to sea after a day of fishing? By observing the bird's behavior, the navigator can glean valuable information about the location of nearby islands. And let's not forget the waves. They aren't just random undulations, they carry information about the shape of the coastline, the presence of reefs, and the direction of the wind. The navigator can feel the land long before he sees it, sensing the subtle changes in the wave patterns as they reflect off distant shores. It's like having a sixth sense, an intuitive understanding of the ocean's language. Now, I know what you might be thinking, okay, that sounds impressive, but surely there were some mishaps along the way. Some wrong turns. Maybe a few canoes ending up in, well, let's just say, less than ideal locations. Of course. Navigation, even with the most advanced techniques, isn't foolproof. The weather can change unexpectedly, the stars can be obscured by clouds, and even the most skilled navigator can make mistakes. But the Polynesians were remarkably resilient. They learned from their errors, adapted to changing conditions, and developed strategies for dealing with unexpected challenges. Their success wasn't just about knowledge and skill, it was also about courage, resilience, and a deep respect for the power of the ocean. And while we're on the topic of power, did you know that the most powerful lightning strike ever recorded struck Oklahoma in 2007? It was roughly 300 kilometers long. Now that's what I call impactful. One thing that always amazes me is the sheer scale of the Polynesian voyages. They didn't just hop from one island to the next, they explored vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean, settling islands thousands of miles apart. From Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the south, from Easter Island in the east to Micronesia in the west, they left their mark on the map of the Pacific. They were the ultimate explorers, driven by curiosity, courage, and an unshakable belief in their ability to navigate the seas. And it wasn't just about finding new land. It was about connecting with other cultures, sharing knowledge, and building communities across vast distances. They traded goods, exchanged ideas, and intermarried, creating a vibrant network of interconnected societies throughout the Pacific. In essence, they built a prehistoric internet, connecting disparate islands through a shared language, culture, and seafaring tradition. But there's also a darker side to this story. With European colonization came the suppression of traditional knowledge, including the art of celestial navigation. Many indigenous navigators were discouraged from practicing their skills, and the knowledge that had been passed down for generations was nearly lost forever. The fact that we're even talking about the Polynesian star compass today is a testament to the resilience of the Polynesian people and their determination to preserve their cultural heritage. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in traditional navigation, with young Polynesians learning the ancient techniques and using them to reconnect with their ancestors. One of the most inspiring examples of this revival is the story of the Hkli, a replica of a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe. In 1976, the Hkli sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti, navigated solely by traditional methods. This voyage proved that Polynesian navigation was not just a myth or a legend, but a viable and highly effective method of seafaring. It ignited a flame of cultural pride throughout Polynesia and inspired a new generation of navigators to learn the ways of their ancestors. So, as you gaze up at the night sky, remember the ancient Polynesians and their incredible star compass. Remember their courage, their knowledge, and their deep connection to the ocean and the stars. Remember that even in the vastness of the universe, we are all connected, voyaging together on this tiny blue planet. And, on a final note, if you ever get lost in the middle of the ocean, just remember to look up. The stars might just show you the way home. Unless, of course, it's cloudy. In which case, you're probably out of luck. Just kidding. Sort of. Maybe pack a good book. But for now, let's just drift off into the starlit sea of dreams. Alright, settle in, make yourself comfy. Maybe grab a warm drink, or a cool compress, whatever gets you in the mood for a little cosmic contemplation. Because tonight, we're diving deep into the ancient skies, not just to admire the pretty lights, but to understand how some of those twinkling diamonds became deeply personal guides. We're talking about Zenith Stars, and how cultures around the world, long before GPS and smartphones, looked up to the very top of their sky to orient themselves in the world, and in their lives. Imagine yourself, a long, long time ago. You're trudging through a dusty field, the sun beating down on your neck. You're miles from anywhere resembling civilization, just endless grassland stretching in every direction. No roads, no landmarks, just the horizon and the oppressive sky. Disorienting, right? Now, fast forward to night. The temperature drops, the stars begin to pepper the inky blackness. You can make out familiar constellations, but without knowing your exact location, they can only help so much. What if you needed to find your way back home, or to a specific destination? This is where Zenith Stars come in. The zenith, if you're a bit hazy on the terminology, is simply the point directly overhead. It's that invisible spot in the sky that's exactly 90 degrees from the horizon. In other words, if you could drop a plumb line straight up from your head, it would point to your zenith. Pretty simple, but deceptively powerful. Think of it like this: the zenith is your personal celestial North Star. It's the point most uniquely associated with your location, because as you move across the surface of the Earth, your zenith moves with you. Now, identifying your zenith star wasn't quite as simple as just looking straight up and picking the brightest one. You needed a little more finesse. And this is where different cultures developed ingenious methods. Some use structures like gnomons, basically, fancy sundials, to cast shadows at noon. By carefully measuring the length and direction of the shadow, they could determine the precise moment the sun reached its highest point, its zenith. Others use sophisticated astronomical instruments, like the armillary sphere, to measure the angles of stars relative to the horizon. It was a painstaking process, requiring years of observation and mathematical calculation, but the result was a deeply personal and incredibly accurate celestial map. Think about the ancient Egyptians. They were masters of celestial observation, and their entire civilization was deeply intertwined with the movements of the stars. They meticulously tracked the rising and setting of certain stars, particularly Sirius, because its appearance heralded the annual flooding of the Nile, the very lifeblood of their society. While not directly related to Zenith stars as personal guides, their sophisticated understanding of the sky demonstrates their capacity for celestial navigation and alignment, paving the way for later applications of zenithal observations. You can almost hear them whispering, "The stars, they are not just pretty decorations, darling. They are everything." But why go to all this trouble? Well, imagine you were a traveler, a merchant, or even a priest traversing vast distances. Knowing your zenith star allowed you to maintain a sense of direction, to orient yourself even in unfamiliar territory. It was a crucial tool for long-distance navigation, enabling trade and cultural exchange across continents. In fact, the Polynesian navigators, some of the most skilled seafarers in history, used zenith stars, along with wave patterns, bird flight, and the taste of the water, to navigate across thousands of miles of open ocean. They could pinpoint tiny islands, sometimes only a few miles across, after weeks or even months at sea. That's like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach the size of Texas, while blindfolded. Talk about impressive. And it wasn't just about practicality. For many cultures, the zenith held deep spiritual significance. It was seen as the gateway to the heavens, the point of closest connection to the divine. Your zenith star, therefore, wasn't just a navigational marker, it was a personal link to the cosmos, a reflection of your place in the universe. It was believed to influence your destiny, your character, your very soul. Kind of like a really accurate astrological birth chart. In ancient Mesoamerica, the Maya were particularly fascinated with zenith passages. Twice a year, the sun would pass directly overhead at specific locations, casting no shadow at noon. These zenith passages were considered sacred times, marking important agricultural cycles and religious ceremonies. Imagine the awe and reverence they must have felt, standing in the shadowless light of the zenith sun, feeling utterly connected to the cosmos. They built elaborate structures, like the Caracol Observatory in Belize, specifically designed to track the movements of the sun and other celestial bodies. Historians still argue whether these structures were primarily religious or scientific in purpose, but it's clear that the Maya had a profound understanding of astronomy and its impact on their lives. Now, let's pop over to India. The concept of nakshatras, or lunar mansions, is deeply embedded in Vedic astrology and astronomy. These are 27 sectors along the ecliptic, the path the sun appears to take across the sky. While not strictly zenith stars, the nakshatras were used to determine auspicious times for ceremonies, planting, and other important events. Each nakshatra is associated with a specific star or group of stars, and it's believed that the moon's position in a particular nakshatra at the time of your birth influences your personality and destiny. So, in a way, your nakshatra is your personal celestial guardian, watching over you from the heavens. It's like having a cosmic roomie, except they never do the dishes. Moving north to China, we find a similar emphasis on celestial observation. The Chinese developed a complex system of constellations and star lore, much of which was tied to the imperial court and the emperor's power. They believed that the emperor was a direct representative of heaven on earth, and that his actions were reflected in the movements of the stars. Any unusual celestial phenomena, like comets or eclipses, were interpreted as omens, either good or bad, depending on their position and characteristics. The Imperial Astronomical Bureau was responsible for meticulously tracking these events and advising the emperor accordingly. Can you imagine having a job where you get to tell the emperor that a particularly sparkly star means he should probably avoid making any major decisions that week? Talk about pressure. But the idea of zenith stars as personal guides wasn't just confined to grand empires and elaborate observatories. It permeated everyday life, influencing everything from architecture to agriculture. In many traditional cultures, houses were aligned with specific stars or constellations, ensuring harmony with the cosmos and bringing good fortune to the inhabitants. Fields were planted according to the movements of the stars, maximizing crop yields and ensuring a bountiful harvest. The stars were not just distant points of light, they were active participants in the rhythms of life, guiding and shaping human destiny. Even today, in our technologically advanced world, the allure of Zenith Stars persists. While we may no longer rely on them for navigation in the literal sense, they still hold a powerful symbolic meaning. We look up at the night sky and feel a sense of wonder, a connection to something larger than ourselves. We search for meaning in the constellations, in the patterns of the stars, just as our ancestors did millennia ago. There's something deeply comforting about knowing that, no matter where we are, no matter how lost we may feel, there's always a point directly overhead, a personal zenith, marking our place in the universe. It's a reminder that we are all connected, to each other, to the earth, and to the stars. It's a reminder that we are all, in our own way, guided by the lights above. Alright, settle in, make yourself comfortable. Maybe grab a blanket. We're diving deep today, not literally, unless you're into that sort of thing, in which case, hey, no judgment. We're going to talk about reading the ocean, understanding her moods, and becoming fluent in the language of waves and wind. Think of it as ocean whispering 101. You stand at the bow, the salt spray kissing your face. The rhythmic creak of the boat is almost hypnotic. You're feeling pretty confident, maybe even a little cocky. You've got your GPS, your charts, all the latest tech. But the ocean doesn't care about your gadgets. She speaks a different language, a language of swells and gusts, of rips and lulls. And if you want to navigate her waters safely, you need to learn to listen. You see those ripples forming on the surface? Those are cat's paws, little puffs of wind just tickling the water. They're fleeting, ephemeral. Pay attention, though, because they're telling you where the wind is headed. Are they dark and defined, or light and scattered? The darker ones indicate stronger gusts, and the direction they travel shows you the wind's current path. Now, don't go thinking you can predict tomorrow's weather from this. It's more about understanding the immediate conditions around you. It's like reading a mood ring, but for the sea. Speaking of fleeting things, did you know that the shortest recorded war in history lasted only 38 minutes? It was between Britain and Zanzibar in 1896. Imagine, all that paperwork for less than an episode of your favorite sitcom. Now, look out towards the horizon. Notice the wave patterns. Are they long and rolling, or short and choppy? Long, rolling swells usually indicate a storm far out at sea. Those waves have traveled hundreds, even thousands of miles, carrying the energy of that distant tempest to your little corner of the ocean. They're like ocean telegrams. And, a little secret for you, if you find yourself drifting in a calm sea with nothing to do, you can use this to your advantage to calculate when you'll arrive to your destination. Just estimate the distance to the horizon and use a wave calculator online to input the length and estimate the speed. But maybe pack an extra book, you might be waiting a while. Short, choppy waves, on the other hand, are usually caused by local winds. They're more reactive, responding directly to the breeze. If you see a sudden change in the wave pattern, it's a sign that the wind is shifting. And that's important because changes in wind speed and direction can drastically affect your course and your safety. I'm sure that someone invented a device for this too, but why bother with the electronics if you've got the raw materials right here? Ever notice those weird areas where the waves seem to break irregularly, or where there's a sudden change in the water color? Those are potential signs of underwater obstructions, like reefs or sandbars. They can also indicate areas of strong currents. Pay close attention to these areas, and give them a wide berth. Unless, of course, you're intentionally trying to explore a reef, which, let's be honest, sounds way more fun than filing taxes. Historians still argue whether the sinking of the Titanic was solely due to an iceberg or if a combination of factors, including unusually strong currents and navigational errors, contributed to the disaster. Either way, it's a good reminder that the ocean is a powerful force to be reckoned with. Wind, of course, is the other half of the equation. You probably already know the basics. Wind is created by differences in air pressure. Warm air rises, creating low pressure, and cooler air rushes in to fill the void, creating wind. But the details are where things get interesting. The Coriolis effect, caused by the Earth's rotation, deflects winds to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This is why hurricanes spin in opposite directions on either side of the equator. Science, right? Who needs fiction when reality is this wonderfully weird? Knowing the prevailing wind patterns in your area is crucial for navigation. Local knowledge is invaluable. Talk to the local sailors, the fishermen, the people who spend their lives on the water. They can tell you about the spots where the wind always picks up, or where it tends to die down. They know the quirks of the coastline, the hidden dangers, and the secret anchorages. And, sometimes, they'll tell you a fish story or two. You can even use the wind to estimate your position. If you know the wind's direction and speed, and you know your boat's speed and heading, you can use trigonometry to calculate your drift. This is particularly useful if your electronic navigation equipment fails. It's like being a human GPS, only powered by coffee and sheer determination. And who needs batteries when you have caffeine? Now, I know what you're thinking. All this sounds complicated, right? It's not something you can learn overnight. But with practice, and a healthy dose of observation, you can start to develop a feel for the ocean. You'll start to anticipate the changes in wind and waves, and you'll learn to read the subtle clues that the ocean is constantly giving you. Just remember, the ocean is a living, breathing entity. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving. And the more you learn about it, the more you'll appreciate its beauty and its power. You see that cloud formation on the horizon? That lenticular cloud, shaped like a flying saucer. It doesn't necessarily mean aliens are coming, although, you never know. It does mean that there's likely some strong winds aloft. And those winds can affect the surface winds, creating unpredictable gusts. Which reminds me, you know how scientists are still debating the cause of ball lightning? Like, a glowing sphere of electricity just floating around? Sometimes, I feel like my brain is ball lightning after a particularly long day. Also, let's not forget the importance of celestial navigation. Before GPS, sailors relied on the stars, the sun, and the moon to find their way. It's a skill that's becoming increasingly rare, but it's still incredibly valuable. Knowing how to use a sextant and a set of nautical tables can be a lifesaver if your electronics go down. It's also a fantastic way to connect with the history of navigation. Imagine, for centuries, sailors guided themselves across vast oceans using nothing but the stars. It's a humbling thought. Legend has it that the Vikings used sunstones to navigate even on cloudy days, a practice that, if true, suggests an incredible understanding of light polarization. Now, a word of caution. Don't get overconfident. The ocean is unforgiving. Never underestimate its power. Always respect its dangers. And always, always be prepared for the unexpected. Because out there, on the open water, anything can happen. I knew a guy once, who thought he knew everything about the sea. He ended up spending 3 days adrift on a rubber raft, singing sea shanties to a family of seagulls. Moral of the story: humility is your best friend out here. Before you head out, always check the weather forecast. Pay attention to the warnings. And if you're unsure about anything, don't go. There's no shame in staying in port and waiting for better conditions. It's far better to be safe than sorry. And remember, even the most experienced sailors can be caught off guard. The sea is a great teacher, but its lessons can be harsh. So, the next time you're out on the water, take a moment to really look around. Observe the waves, feel the wind, and listen to the ocean. She has a lot to tell you, if you're willing to listen. And who knows, you might just learn something new. Maybe even something life-saving. Alright, settle in, settle in. Get comfy. Maybe grab a warm drink, a soft blanket. We're about to embark on a journey, a mental journey, of course. Unless you happen to have a Polynesian canoe handy, in which case, kudos to you. Seriously. Send me pictures. Imagine the vast, shimmering expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Just, endless blue. Now, picture yourself, not just on that ocean, but utterly dependent on it. Your life, your culture, your very existence tied to the rhythm of the waves and the whims of the wind. That, my friend, is the world of the ancient Polynesians. And the key to their world? Their canoes. Think about it, these weren't just boats. They were sophisticated, seaworthy vessels, meticulously crafted with knowledge passed down through generations. You can almost smell the salt-laced air, the fragrant wood shavings, and the earthy scent of the fiber used to bind it all together. You're kneeling on the warm sand, watching master craftsmen at work. Years, sometimes decades, went into constructing a single canoe. We're not talking about popping down to your local marina for a quick fiberglass job, are we? These were masterpieces of engineering and art. And you know what else is an art? Actually finding the right tree to begin with. They couldn't just waltz into Home Depot. These were massive trees, typically koa or breadfruit, painstakingly felled, then carved and shaped with stone adzes. Imagine the sheer physical effort involved. You'd be eating protein bars by the dozen. And the precision. One wrong swing and, well, you're finding a smaller tree. The hull wasn't just a hollowed-out log, oh no. That's way too basic. They used multiple pieces carefully fitted together, often lashed with Zenith, a strong cord made from coconut fiber. It's like a giant, floating jigsaw puzzle. And each piece had to be perfect. This is where their deep understanding of wood and its properties came into play. I bet they were pretty good at carpentry in general. I imagine their homes were pretty swell, too. Now, let's talk about those outriggers. Arguably the defining feature of many Polynesian canoes, and honestly, just plain genius. You've got a main hull, and then attached to it, usually on one or both sides, are these smaller floats. Think of it as adding training wheels to a boat, but way more sophisticated and seaworthy. They provided incredible stability, allowing these canoes to navigate treacherous waters and withstand powerful winds. Ever tried to balance on a surfboard without knowing how to do it? It's the same principle, only, much, much bigger. I think. I've never tried to balance on a Polynesian canoe. It's on my bucket list. But here's a thought. Did you ever wonder where they even got the idea for outriggers? Like, one day someone just looked at a log floating next to them and went, aha. Stability. It's a fun thought experiment, isn't it? And it wasn't just about stability. The outrigger also allowed for a narrower, more streamlined hull, which meant greater speed. Think of it like the difference between a barge and a racing yacht. You're cruising along, feeling the wind in your hair, or what's left of it, effortlessly slicing through the waves. I'm getting a bit jealous, to be honest. You were made to sail, pal. Historians still argue whether the outrigger canoe was a Polynesian invention or whether they developed it from other cultures in Southeast Asia. The sails, too, were ingeniously designed. Typically woven from pandanus leaves, they were triangular or trapezoidal and could be adjusted to catch the wind from various angles. They weren't just flapping pieces of cloth. They were carefully constructed to maximize efficiency. They were basically the Formula One race cars of the ancient Pacific. Maybe not as fast. But definitely more scenic. Of course, navigation was paramount. These weren't just pleasure cruises around the harbor. They were voyages of exploration, of colonization, spanning hundreds, even thousands of miles of open ocean. Imagine the courage, the skill, the sheer audacity required to set out into the unknown in a canoe. You'd need more than just a good playlist. How did they do it? Well, they were masters of celestial navigation, reading the stars like we read a map. They observed the patterns of waves, the flight of birds, the subtle changes in wind and current. They had an intimate understanding of the natural world that most of us can only dream of today. Can you tell which direction you're going just by looking at the waves? I didn't think so. They used wayfinding techniques passed down through generations. It was a whole system of knowledge, of lore, committed to memory. Not written down, but sung, chanted, danced. Imagine the pressure on the young apprentices. One wrong calculation and you could end up, well, not where you intended. Talk about performance anxiety. And speaking of performance, there's this fascinating, if slightly fringe, theory that some Polynesian voyages were actually intentional two-way trips. Not just accidental drift voyages, but planned expeditions to maintain contact with distant islands. The evidence is circumstantial, of course, but wouldn't that be wild? The Pacific Ocean wasn't a barrier, it was a highway. It's like the Star Trek model of exploring, but with canoes. Now, let's not forget the cultural significance of these canoes. They weren't just transportation. They were symbols of power, of prestige, of connection to the ancestors. A large, well-built canoe could be a chief's most prized possession, a testament to his leadership and his people's skill. You can almost hear the rhythmic chanting as they launch the canoe for the first time, a blessing for a safe journey, a celebration of their heritage. Canoes also played a crucial role in trade and communication. Imagine the possibilities, exchanging goods, sharing knowledge, forging alliances. It allowed for the exchange of cultural practices, and genetic diversity. In fact, historians still argue about the exact routes of the earliest Polynesian migrations. Did they follow a specific path, or did they spread out in a more random pattern? The canoes are silent witnesses, but their journey is still debated to this day. And then there were the legendary canoes, the vessels of myth and legend. Like the Klee, a modern replica of a traditional voyaging canoe that has sailed around the world, proving the feasibility of ancient Polynesian navigation techniques. I find that pretty inspiring. It's like a tangible connection to the past, a reminder of what humans are capable of when they work together and harness the power of nature. Of course, canoes weren't just about conquest and exploration. They were also about everyday life. Fishing canoes, smaller and simpler, were essential for feeding families and communities. They were used for transporting goods between islands, for visiting relatives, for simply enjoying the beauty of the ocean. Can you imagine just popping over to the next island for a barbecue? What a life! And here's a quirky little fact. Some Polynesian cultures even had specialized canoes for surfing. Can you imagine? Catching waves on a handcrafted wooden vessel, powered only by your skill and the ocean's energy. They weren't just surfing. They were also building and maintaining wooden vehicles. Pretty impressive, when you think about it. Today, the tradition of canoe building and voyaging is still alive in many Polynesian communities. It's a way of preserving their cultural heritage, of reconnecting with their ancestors, of teaching future generations about their unique relationship with the ocean. It's not just about building boats, it's about building community, building identity, building hope. The canoes are silent storytellers, they tell tales of courage, innovation, and resilience. They whisper of a time when humans lived in harmony with the natural world, when the ocean was not a barrier but a bridge. They remind us that even the smallest vessel, powered by human ingenuity and determination, can navigate the vastest of oceans. And that's a lesson worth remembering, don't you think? Okay, now that the story is done, good night. Okay, settle in, make yourself comfortable. Imagine you're wrapped in a cozy blanket, maybe sipping some warm tea. That's the vibe we're going for. We're going to drift through the vast ocean of oral tradition, specifically how it kept crucial navigation skills alive. Think of it like this: before GPS and sextants were everyday carry, your brain, your community's shared memory, was your compass. Pretty wild, right? You're standing on a beach. The sun is warm on your face, the sand is soft beneath your bare feet. The salty air fills your lungs. You watch as a small, hand-carved canoe slices through the waves, heading towards the seemingly endless horizon. There are no charts, no instruments, just the knowledge passed down through generations, whispered in stories around crackling fires. You wonder, how is that even possible? Well, it's all about storytelling. It's not just about entertainment, it's survival. Imagine yourself as a young apprentice navigator in ancient Polynesia. Your grandfather, a seasoned voyager, sits beside you, the firelight dancing in his eyes. He begins to tell a story, not just any story, but a mololo, a sacred narrative that weaves together history, mythology, and practical knowledge. He tells you about Maui, the demigod who fished up the islands from the depths of the ocean. It's a captivating tale, full of bravery and magic, but listen closely. Hidden within the narrative are clues about the stars, the currents, the migratory patterns of birds, and the subtle shifts in the wind. You learn to read the language of the ocean, a language spoken not in words, but in the rustling of palm leaves, the scent of rain carried on the breeze, and the feel of the swell beneath your canoe. You're essentially downloading a human operating system for the sea. He explains how to find your way by the stars, how each island has its own star path, a celestial road map leading home. You learn to recognize the Hkli, the Zenith Star that sits directly above your island, marking its place in the cosmos. He teaches you to differentiate the waves refracted by distant land masses. Knowledge is literally in the swells. Imagine trying to explain that in a textbook. Okay class, today we'll be covering swell refraction analysis. This wasn't just about memorizing facts, it was about internalizing a worldview. It was about understanding your place in the universe and your connection to the natural world. It was about developing a deep respect for the power of the ocean and the wisdom of your ancestors. It was about not getting hopelessly lost in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Which, is a pretty good incentive for paying attention. You see, these stories weren't just recited, they were performed. They were chanted, danced, and acted out, embedding the information in your mind through multiple senses. Think of it like learning a catchy song, the melody and rhythm help you remember the lyrics. Only in this case, the lyrics are about avoiding deadly reefs and finding fresh water. This system worked, and worked well. Polynesian navigators, using only their knowledge of the stars, currents, and bird flight patterns, were able to explore and settle vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean. They reached Hawaii, Easter Island, and New Zealand, traveling thousands of miles in open canoes. It's actually insane, right? Imagine setting off across the Atlantic in a rowboat with nothing but a vague idea of which direction Europe is. And speaking of navigating, let's talk about the Vikings. They were pretty good at sailing, too. A common misconception is that Vikings wore horned helmets. There's actually very little archaeological evidence to support that. They may have had winged helmets for ceremonial purposes, but the horned helmet Viking is mostly a product of 19th century opera costumes. That's right, thanks Wagner. But I digress. The Vikings, despite their penchant for raiding and pillaging, also possessed a sophisticated understanding of navigation. Their sagas, epic tales of heroes and adventures, were more than just entertainment. They also contained valuable information about seafaring, weather patterns, and the location of land. Think about the saga of Eric the Red, which describes the discovery and settlement of Greenland. Embedded within the dramatic narrative are clues about sailing routes, landmarks, and the resources available in this new land. It's like a travel guide disguised as an action movie. And who wouldn't want to be guided by the guy who discovered Vinland? You can almost picture a Viking father telling his son, "Okay, son, listen closely. This part about Thor battling the sea serpent? That's code for, watch out for sudden squalls near Iceland. Got it?" Maybe not exactly, but the point is that the sagas served as a crucial tool for transmitting knowledge across generations. And, just like the Polynesian mololo, the Viking sagas were performed, not just read. They were recited by skilled storytellers, known as skalds, who used rhythm, rhyme, and alliteration to make the information more memorable. Basically, they were Viking rappers, but instead of spitting rhymes about gold chains, they were spitting rhymes about how to avoid getting your longship wrecked on a rocky coast. These stories weren't just about practical knowledge, they were also about cultural identity. They reinforced the values of courage, resilience, and resourcefulness, qualities that were essential for survival in a harsh and unforgiving environment. Remember Bjorn's famous navigation blunder, a skald might recite. He forgot the sea current poem. Don't be like Bjorn. Historians still argue whether the Vikings used sunstones, crystals that could polarize light and reveal the sun's position even on cloudy days. Some believe this was a closely guarded secret, passed down through oral tradition. Others argue that the evidence is inconclusive. But one thing is certain, the Vikings were masters of navigation, and their sagas played a vital role in their success. Oral tradition is not unique to seafaring cultures. Indigenous cultures around the world have used storytelling to transmit knowledge about medicine, agriculture, and the environment for centuries. Think about Aboriginal Australians, who have lived on the continent for over 60,000 years. Their Dreamtime stories, complex narratives that explain the origin of the universe and the interconnectedness of all things, are also a repository of ecological knowledge. These stories contain information about the location of water sources, the seasonal availability of food, and the behavior of animals. They also teach important lessons about conservation and sustainability. It's a very sophisticated method of preservation. You're not just telling people where to find the kangaroo, you're telling them why they should only take what they need. It's a whole different level of storytelling than, say, a TikTok video. Or consider the traditional healers of the Amazon rainforest, who use storytelling to pass down their knowledge of medicinal plants. They tell stories about the spirits of the plants, describing their properties and how to use them to treat various ailments. It's a way of connecting with the natural world on a deeper level and recognizing the power of plants to heal. My grandma used to tell me stories about her garden. She'd anthropomorphize the tomatoes and the zucchini, but honestly, I learned more about gardening from her stories than I ever did from a textbook. These examples highlight the power of oral tradition to preserve knowledge and transmit it across generations. It's a system that relies on memory, performance, and social interaction. It's a system that is deeply embedded in culture and identity. And it's a system that is increasingly threatened by the forces of globalization and modernization. As written language and digital technologies become more prevalent, there is a risk that oral traditions will be lost. But there is also an opportunity to use these technologies to preserve and share these valuable cultural resources. Imagine creating interactive digital archives of oral traditions, allowing future generations to access and learn from the wisdom of their ancestors. The key is to find a balance between preserving the authenticity of oral traditions and adapting them to the digital age. It's about recognizing the unique value of storytelling as a way of transmitting knowledge and ensuring that these stories continue to be told for generations to come. Remember that canoe we saw earlier? It's still out there, sailing towards the horizon. And as long as there are people willing to listen to the stories of the past, the art of navigation will continue to thrive, guided by the stars, the currents, and the wisdom of those who came before. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria was intentionally burned down or whether it was an accidental casualty of war. Regardless, imagine all the stories lost. But the point is, some stories can't be burned down. They live on in the minds and hearts of the people who tell them. And on that note, maybe it's time for some tea. What do you say? Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk about finding your way, when there isn't a little blue dot on your phone telling you exactly where you are. Imagine that. Just stars. And the ocean. You squint up at the inky canvas above, a million pinpricks of light swimming in and out of focus. The salt spray kisses your face, that familiar, earthy smell filling your lungs. You feel the gentle rocking of the Wae Kaulua, the double-hulled canoe, beneath your bare feet. It's quiet, except for the creak of the rigging and the rhythmic splash of the paddles. You are, for all intents and purposes, utterly and completely lost. Or, are you? Because that's the beauty of traditional Polynesian navigation. It's not about not being lost. It's about knowing you're somewhere, and having a pretty darn good idea of where that somewhere is. You aren't just adrift, you are swimming in a galaxy of knowledge. You feel the gentle sway of the canoe again. Notice how the wind whispers against your skin, a constant, subtle pressure. Feel the angle of the sun on your shoulders. These aren't just fleeting sensations, they're clues. They're pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, paint a map of the vast Pacific. You take a deep breath. It might seem a little scary, right? Trusting yourself to the elements instead of relying on GPS satellites. But you are doing something very ancient, very powerful, very, well, Polynesian. Think about it. These seafaring people, originating in Taiwan and islands Southeast Asia, spread across the largest ocean on Earth, settling thousands of islands, long before Europeans even dreamed of venturing far from their coastlines. We're talking about a period roughly from 1500 BC to 1450 AD. Their canoes were their homes, their world. The ocean wasn't a barrier, but a highway, a connection. Imagine being able to read the swells in the water. They aren't some random act of physics, each swell has a story to tell, reflecting the land masses they have bounced off of. They carry the message of islands that are both behind and ahead of you. How did they do it? That's where the magic, and the incredible, meticulous knowledge, comes in. It wasn't just luck. Historians still argue whether their voyages were intentional exploration or accidental drifts, but regardless, the Polynesians possessed a sophisticated understanding of the natural world that allowed them to navigate with incredible accuracy. You glance towards the horizon, and you can almost imagine the ancestors whispering in your ears. Think about the stars. Not just any stars, mind you. Specific stars, rising and setting at specific points on the horizon, marking specific latitudes. You memorize their positions relative to each other, building a celestial map in your mind. You learn the names of these stars, not just as points of light, but as guides, as friends. For example, Hercule, a star known to Westerners as Arcturus, was a crucial navigational star. It guided the namesake voyaging canoe Hercule on its epic voyages. You can picture the navigator, his eyes fixed on the horizon, reciting chants and stories passed down through generations. Each chant a mnemonic device, each story a lesson in seamanship. And it wasn't just the stars. You learn to read the waves, feeling the subtle differences in their rhythm and direction. You learn to identify the seabirds that frequent specific islands, recognizing their flight patterns and the types of fish they hunt. You even learn to taste the saltiness of the water, discerning subtle variations that indicate the proximity of land. Yeah, you heard that right. Taste the water. Sounds a little unhygienic, doesn't it? But it's true. The water around islands is often less salty due to freshwater runoff. I mean, maybe bring your own water bottle along with a water filter for practicality purposes. No need to risk getting sick, you know. These methods were so highly respected that there were schools dedicated to mastering the navigation skills. A famous one in the Caroline Islands was called wearying. You are also taught how to find the telapa, which are reflections off of islands that are too far away to see normally. These reflections will appear in the clouds and it takes time to be able to differentiate them from the regular clouds. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the sheer dedication and discipline required to master these skills. It wasn't just about memorizing facts, it was about developing a deep connection to the natural world, a sense of intuition that allowed you to feel your way across the ocean. But here's the thing. This incredible knowledge was almost lost. With the arrival of European explorers and the introduction of Western technology, traditional navigation began to fade. Suddenly, there were compasses and sextants, charts and chronometers. Why bother memorizing star patterns when you could simply consult a map? Why feel the waves when you could rely on a mechanical device? You can imagine the allure of these new tools. They were faster, easier, seemingly more accurate. But something was lost in the transition. A connection to the ocean, a sense of belonging, a profound understanding of the natural world. By the mid-20th century, traditional navigation was on the brink of extinction. Only a handful of elders still possessed the knowledge, and few young people were interested in learning it. Then, in the 1970s, something remarkable happened. A group of passionate individuals, led by Hawaiian artist and historian Herb Kawainui Kane and navigator Mau Pielug from Satawal in Micronesia, decided to revive the art of traditional Polynesian navigation. Kane designed the Hokule, a replica of a traditional double-hulled voyaging canoe. Mau Pielug, one of the last master navigators, agreed to guide the Hokule on its maiden voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti in 1976. This voyage was a turning point. It proved that traditional navigation was not just a relic of the past, but a living, breathing tradition that could be used to navigate the oceans today. You are witnessing history being remade. You feel the ripple effects of that voyage even now. The Hokule has since sailed around the world, inspiring a new generation of Polynesian navigators. Schools and community programs have been established to teach traditional navigation skills. The knowledge is being passed down once again, ensuring that it will not be lost to time. There's a resurgence of cultural pride, a renewed appreciation for the wisdom of the ancestors. People are reconnecting with their heritage, embracing the values of sustainability and environmental stewardship that are inherent in traditional Polynesian culture. And it's not just about preserving the past, it's about shaping the future. Traditional navigation offers a unique perspective on our relationship with the natural world, a reminder that we are all interconnected, that we are all part of a larger ecosystem. You might be on the path to becoming a guardian of tradition. Think about the implications for sustainable tourism, for environmental conservation, for education. Traditional navigation can teach us valuable lessons about resilience, adaptability, and the importance of living in harmony with nature. You look around the Wa'e Kaulua, at the faces of your fellow voyagers, and you feel a sense of hope, a sense of possibility. You are part of something bigger than yourself, something ancient and powerful and enduring. You can even use that knowledge to prank your friends. When they start using their GPS, you can point in a random direction and say, "Nah, the island is over there. I can feel it in my bones." Just watch their faces. I'm just kidding, you will want to tell them about traditional navigation so they understand. But it is a funny thought though. You know that there is something you can do to help spread the beauty of traditional navigation. Maybe you aren't ready to navigate by the stars just yet. Maybe you're just starting to learn about the Polynesian culture and their incredible achievements. It's okay. Take your time. Read books, watch documentaries, visit museums. Talk to people who are involved in the revival of traditional navigation. Or, just keep listening to me rambling on. Every little bit helps. Every time you share a story, every time you ask a question, every time you express your appreciation, you're helping to keep this tradition alive. And who knows? Maybe one day, you'll find yourself standing on the deck of a Wa'e Kaulua, squinting up at the stars, feeling the wind on your face, and knowing, with a certainty that transcends logic, exactly where you are. Maybe you will eventually be able to talk to the water and listen to the stories it has to share. You smile. The ocean stretches out before you, vast and mysterious. But you're not afraid. You're not lost. You're just navigating. And that, my friend, is an incredible feeling. It's a feeling of connection, of purpose, of belonging. You will fall asleep under the stars tonight, and dream about a million islands. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's talk about something relaxing. Like slowly bobbing in the middle of the vast, unforgiving Pacific Ocean, clinging to a tiny raft with your closest friends and family. Ah, doesn't that sound peaceful? Maybe not. Today we're diving, figuratively, of course, unless you're actually watching this from a submarine, into the absolutely bonkers challenges and risks faced by ancient Polynesian navigators. Forget your cruise ship buffet and onboard entertainment. We're talking real, raw, existential dread, with a gentle, ASMR twist. Imagine, if you will, you're a Polynesian navigator. You've spent years learning the secrets of the stars, the waves, the birds, all the subtle cues that guide you across the seemingly endless expanse of water. You're about to embark on a voyage that could last weeks, maybe even months. Your vessel is a double-hulled canoe, a marvel of engineering for its time, lashed together with coconut fiber and powered by the wind and the sheer will of its crew. Sounds idyllic, right? Wrong. First, let's talk about food. You trudge to the storage area, which is probably more cramped than your last budget airline flight. You're stocking up for this journey, and your menu consists largely of, well, things that don't spoil easily. Think dried fish, coconuts, taro, breadfruit, and maybe, just maybe, if you're lucky and the fishing gods are smiling, you'll snag a fresh catch. Water is even more precious. You're relying on gourds or bamboo containers filled with rainwater, carefully collected before departure. If you run out, well, let's just say you'll be wishing you packed a few extra bottles of Evian. Dehydration is a real and constant threat, and you find yourself rationing every drop. Think of it as a very intense, very wet, version of the Whole30 diet. And speaking of wet, you're always wet. The spray of the waves, the humidity, the occasional downpour, you're basically living in a perpetual state of dampness. Your clothes, if you even have much in the way of clothes, are clinging to you like a second, soggy skin. Saltwater chafing? Oh, it's a thing. A very, very unpleasant thing. You start to wonder if you'll ever feel truly dry again. It's enough to make you crave a desert vacation, which, ironically, would present a whole new set of survival challenges. But hey, at least you have company. You're surrounded by your fellow voyagers, all equally damp, equally hungry, and equally fragrant. Let's be honest, personal hygiene wasn't exactly a top priority on these long voyages. Imagine the aroma, a blend of saltwater, dried fish, sweat, and unwashed bodies. It's a unique olfactory experience, to say the least. You quickly learn to appreciate the vastness of the ocean, if only for the fact that it provides ample ventilation. Maybe that's why they went so far, they needed to escape the smell. Historians still argue whether the need for new resources or overpopulation drove Polynesian expansion, but maybe it was just a desperate search for fresh air. Then there's the sun. You're exposed to the relentless glare of the tropical sun day after day, week after week. Sunscreen? Not an option. Shade? Minimal. You try to protect yourself with woven mats or large leaves, but it's a losing battle. Your skin is constantly burned and peeling. Your eyes are strained from squinting into the horizon. You start to dream of sunglasses and wide-brimmed hats. You're basically a human raisin slowly baking in the sun. But the real danger, the thing that keeps you up at night, assuming you can sleep on a hard, damp deck surrounded by snoring companions, is the weather. The Pacific Ocean is notorious for its unpredictable storms. One minute, you're sailing along under clear skies, the next you're caught in a raging tempest, battling towering waves and howling winds. Your canoe is tossed around like a toy. The ropes strain, the hull creaks, and you pray to the gods that your vessel will hold together. Navigation becomes nearly impossible. You're just trying to survive. This is where your knowledge of traditional navigation techniques becomes crucial. You rely on your understanding of wave patterns, cloud formations, and the movement of the stars to keep you on course. Or, at least, to keep you from getting completely lost. And even on clear days, navigation wasn't exactly a walk in the park. You're relying on a combination of celestial navigation, wave patterns, bird flight paths, and your own intuition. You have no charts, no compass, no GPS. Just your knowledge, your senses, and a deep connection to the natural world. It's an incredible feat of skill and knowledge, but it's also incredibly challenging. One wrong calculation, one misinterpretation of a wave pattern, and you could be hopelessly off course. Lost at sea. Now, here's a quirky little fact for you. Some historians believe that Polynesian navigators may have used a type of star compass, a mnemonic device that helped them remember the rising and setting points of different stars. Imagine trying to memorize the positions of hundreds of stars. Talk about a mental workout. You'd probably be dreaming in constellations. Beyond the physical dangers, there's the psychological toll. The isolation, the monotony, the constant uncertainty, it can all take a heavy toll on your mind. You miss your family, your home, your familiar surroundings. You start to question your sanity. Are you really seeing that island on the horizon, or is it just a mirage? You start talking to the seabirds, and they don't answer back, which is frankly rude. And let's not forget about the wildlife. Sharks are a constant presence, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to snatch a stray limb. Whales can capsize your canoe with a single flick of their tail. Giant squid, well, let's just say you don't want to meet one of those in the middle of the night. Although, some sources say that Polynesian voyagers used sharks' teeth as weapons. It's a nice thought to think you could fight one off with its cousin's dentures, but it's probably more effective to just stay away from the sharks. One mainstream historical fact: Polynesian navigators were incredibly skilled at reading the swells of the ocean. They could detect subtle changes in wave patterns that indicated the presence of distant land. It's like having a built-in sonar system. Pretty amazing, huh? Now, a fringe tidbit for you: there's a theory that Polynesian navigators may have even reached the Americas long before Columbus. Some researchers point to similarities in plant species and cultural practices as evidence of pre-Columbian contact. Could it be true? We may never know for sure. But the thought of these intrepid voyagers crossing the vast Pacific and encountering the civilizations of the Americas is definitely intriguing. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, hopefully in a nice, dry bed, spare a thought for those brave Polynesian navigators. They faced incredible challenges and risks in their quest to explore and colonize the islands of the Pacific. They were true pioneers, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and endurance. And they did it all without GPS, sunscreen, or even a decent shower. That's dedication. So, maybe next time you're complaining about your Wi-Fi being slow, remember those guys and be a little bit grateful. Because comparatively, your struggles are a gentle breeze. And now, good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the sharks bite. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk about navigation. Not the kind where your phone nags at you to make a left onto Elm Street, but the real navigation. The kind that demands you stare down the abyss of the unknown and emerge victorious, or at least not entirely lost. Think Magellan, Cook, Slocum. These weren't just guys with boats. They were mental athletes. You're standing on the deck of a caravel, the salt spray stinging your face. The sun beats down, reflecting off the endless blue. Days bleed into weeks, and weeks, well, they just keep bleeding. There's no land in sight, just the relentless horizon. Your world shrinks to the compass, the quadrant, the log line, and the charts, maps that are probably wrong, but all you have. You check your sextant, aligning the horizon with the sun, compensating for refraction and the ship's motion. The angle is crucial. A single degree of error can put you miles off course after weeks at sea. Every calculation is life or death. Kinda puts that missed exit on the freeway into perspective, doesn't it? And it's boring. Let's be honest. Gloriously, agonizingly boring. You're out here, days at a time, doing the same mind-numbing calculations, again and again. You're fighting the urge to just stare at the pretty water and daydream about something exciting, like finding a good bakery back home. But no. You must focus. This is where mental fortitude comes into play. It's not about being a genius mathematician, though that probably wouldn't hurt. It's about the ability to consistently perform, to be meticulous, even when your brain is begging for a vacation. Imagine, then, that you are Ferdinand Magellan. It's 1519, and you're leading an expedition for Spain to find a westward route to the Spice Islands. You've convinced the king that it can be done, even though everyone else thinks you're nuts. You are circumnavigating the globe but will not make it back to Spain, unfortunately. Now, toss in scurvy, mutiny, dwindling supplies, and the ever-present threat of storms. Now we're cooking. This is when the mental discipline really kicks in. You're not just calculating longitude, you're also managing a crew of increasingly disgruntled sailors, trying to maintain morale when hope is a distant glimmer on the horizon. You're dealing with constant microaggressions and the constant threat of a full-blown rebellion. You have to be a leader, a diplomat, a mathematician, and a weatherman all rolled into one salty package. Plus, you have to convince people that sailing toward South America is totally a good idea. Good luck with that. And sleep? What sleep? You grab a few hours when you can, knowing that at any moment, a sudden squall or a panicked lookout could drag you back on deck. You are perpetually tired. I get like that after 2 episodes of the Great British Bake Off. You can't exactly Google how to handle a mutiny at sea. There's no app for that. You rely on your experience, your intuition, and sheer willpower. You need to be able to think clearly under pressure, to make split-second decisions that could save your ship and your crew. One wrong call, and you're shark bait. You're basically running a floating startup in the 16th century, except with fewer stock options and a much higher risk of drowning. Let's talk about the mental toolkit these navigators carried. Memory was crucial. Before reliable chronometers, navigators often relied on complex mental models of wind patterns, currents, and star positions. They had to memorize vast amounts of information and recall it instantly. It's like having a built-in nautical almanac in your brain. I can barely remember my grocery list without my phone, so I'm consistently in awe of these guys. And then there's the spatial reasoning. You're not just looking at a map, you're visualizing yourself in relation to the stars, the land masses, if any, and the unseen depths below. You are building a three-dimensional model of your environment in your head. This is a skill that few of us fully appreciate today, because we're so reliant on GPS. But back then, it was the difference between finding your way home and becoming a footnote in a pirate's log. Beyond the technical skills, there's also the psychological aspect of being at sea. Loneliness, isolation, and the sheer monotony of the voyage can take a toll on even the most seasoned sailor. There is no Netflix. There's no Instagram. There's just you, the ocean, and the increasingly unsettling realization that you haven't spoken to another human being in weeks. You have to learn to cope with the void, to find meaning in the endless expanse of water. Some sailors turn to religion, others to storytelling, and still others, well, let's just say they developed a very close relationship with the ship's cat. Okay, quick historical fact. Polynesian navigators were masters of celestial navigation, using the stars, wave patterns, and even bird flight to navigate across vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean. They did this centuries before Europeans were even dreaming of exploring the world. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some historians believe that Vikings used sunstones, crystals that could polarize light, to navigate on cloudy days. The stones allegedly allowed them to determine the sun's position even when it was obscured by clouds. Whether this is true is another matter. Historians still argue whether these stones actually existed or were simply a myth. The debate rages on, fueled by a few tantalizing mentions in Old Norse sagas and the occasional discovery of a strange crystal in a Viking burial site. Back to you, the intrepid navigator. You've weathered storms, navigated treacherous currents, and even survived a brief encounter with a suspiciously friendly pod of dolphins. You are a master of your craft. Your mind is a finely tuned instrument, capable of processing vast amounts of information and making life-or-death decisions in a split second. You've developed the mental fortitude to withstand boredom, loneliness, and the constant uncertainty of the sea. But don't get too cocky. The ocean has a way of humbling even the most experienced sailors. And it's not just about physical navigation, it's about navigating the complexities of human nature, the shifting alliances, and the constant power struggles that play out on the small, confined world of a ship. You are a psychologist, a politician, and a preacher all rolled into one. You have to be able to read people, to anticipate their needs and desires, and to inspire them to follow you into the unknown. Consider Captain James Cook, exploring the Pacific in the late 18th century. He was a brilliant navigator, but he was also a skilled diplomat, forging relationships with indigenous populations and navigating the complex political landscape of the Pacific Islands. He wasn't just mapping coastlines, he was mapping human relationships. In other words, you need serious people skills. Navigating these human relationships are a must. But the mental fortitude of a navigator extends beyond the practical and the psychological. It also encompasses a certain philosophical outlook, a willingness to embrace the unknown and to find meaning in the face of uncertainty. You are staring into the abyss, and the abyss is staring back. You have to be able to accept that you don't have all the answers, that you will make mistakes, and that sometimes, things will go terribly wrong. But you can't give up. You need to be resilient, adaptable, and willing to learn from your experiences. Every voyage is a lesson, and every storm is an opportunity to grow. You are constantly evolving, refining your skills, and deepening your understanding of the world. The sea is your teacher, and you are a perpetual student. You'll be more zen than a yoga instructor at the end of it all. Okay, another quick fact. Longitude was a notoriously difficult problem to solve until the invention of accurate marine chronometers in the 18th century. Before that, navigators relied on dead reckoning, a method of estimating their position based on their speed, course, and elapsed time. I hope they were good at estimating. And here's a joke. What do you call a pirate with two eyes? A pirate. One last quirky tidbit. It is rumored that some early navigators would intentionally introduce livestock, like pigs or goats, onto uninhabited islands. This would act as a kind of emergency rations for future voyages. Can you imagine stumbling upon a deserted island and being greeted by a herd of feral goats? It would be both terrifying and delicious. So, the next time you look at a map, take a moment to appreciate the mental fortitude of the navigators who charted those waters. They were not just sailors, they were mental athletes, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and exploration. They faced challenges that most of us can barely imagine, and they did so with courage, determination, and a healthy dose of madness. Maybe that's the key, embracing the madness. And maybe that's why you feel so sleepy now. It's the vicarious exhaustion of living the life of a navigator, even if only in your mind. Sweet dreams, mate. Alright, settle in, pull up a virtual beanbag chair, and let's chat about plants and birds. And the surprisingly vital role they played in keeping early explorers from, well, sailing off the edge of the world, which, by the way, wasn't really a concern, but it sounds dramatic, doesn't it? You're out there, weeks into a voyage. The vast expanse of ocean stretches before you, an endless canvas of blue. Salt spray kisses your face, the rhythmic creak of the ship is your constant companion, and the only colors you've seen lately are various shades of turquoise and the increasingly questionable hues of the ship's biscuit. You're probably starting to hallucinate slightly. And then, a bird. A little brown job, flitting around the mast. No big deal, right? Wrong. Think about it. Birds, especially land birds, don't generally like to hang out hundreds of miles from solid ground. That little brown blur represents hope. It means land is, somewhere. It's a breadcrumb, a feathered GPS leading you to a potentially life-saving island. You watch it, you study its flight path, you pray it doesn't decide to take a nap on your head. You might even name it Fernando, perhaps. Or maybe just hope. Early navigators were incredibly attuned to these subtle clues. They weren't just relying on dead reckoning and the occasional star sighting. They were ecological detectives, piecing together a picture of the ocean environment. Different species of birds meant different distances from land. Certain seabirds might venture further out, but if you saw a flock of smaller birds, like terns or noddies, you knew you were getting close. Think of it like bird-based sonar. Feathers, not frequencies. So next time you're at the beach, take a moment to appreciate those squawking gulls, they're distant relatives of ancient cartographers. And it wasn't just birds. Plants played a crucial role, too. You might find seaweed drifting in the currents, unlike the sargassum that floats in vast mats, this seaweed might be freshly torn from coastal rocks. That's a big clue. You analyze the species, Does it grow only in shallow water? Does it only grow near particular types of land? The answers told you a lot about what kind of island to expect: a low-lying atoll, a volcanic peak. Historians still argue about the exact level of ecological knowledge possessed by these early seafarers, but the evidence is pretty compelling that they were paying close attention. Frankly, if my life depended on finding land, I'd be pretty invested in marine botany, too. Consider the humble coconut. You spot one floating in the water. It's not just a potential source of hydration and a makeshift flotation device. It's a message in a bottle, sent by a tropical shore. Coconuts are remarkably buoyant and can travel hundreds, even thousands, of miles. They're like little botanical emissaries, whispering the promise of palm trees and sandy beaches. If you're lucky, it might even have a little umbrella attached. Okay, maybe not the umbrella. Now, tracking plants and animals wasn't exactly foolproof. Currents could be misleading, birds could get blown off course, and those coconuts might have been bobbing around for months, leading you to a non-existent island. But these natural indicators provided valuable supplementary information, helping navigators narrow their search and increase their chances of success. It's like having a really unreliable treasure map drawn by a slightly inebriated seagull. But hey, it's better than nothing. These aren't exactly cutting-edge concepts, of course. Every school kid learns how Polynesian navigators used wave patterns, star positions, and bird flight to find their way across vast stretches of the Pacific. But what's often overlooked is the sheer depth of ecological understanding required to make these observations meaningful. It wasn't enough to simply see a bird, you had to know what kind of bird it was, what its habits were, and what its presence implied about the surrounding environment. These weren't just sailors, they were naturalists, meteorologists, and cartographers all rolled into one. They were the original Renaissance seafarers. Think about the sheer mental map they had to create. Not just of coastlines and islands, but of prevailing winds, ocean currents, migratory routes, and plant distribution. It's mind-boggling. We rely on GPS and satellite imagery. They had to rely on their senses, their knowledge, and their connection to the natural world. Talk about trusting your gut. My gut usually just tells me to order another pizza. But the use of flora and fauna as indicators extended beyond simply locating land. It also helped navigators understand the characteristics of different islands. The types of plants and animals present could tell them about the climate, the soil conditions, and the availability of fresh water. This information was crucial for determining whether an island was suitable for settlement or simply a place to resupply before continuing the voyage. If you found an island covered in lush vegetation and teeming with birdlife, you knew you had stumbled upon a fertile oasis. If you found an arid, rocky island with sparse vegetation, you knew you were in for a tougher time. It was like reading a giant, organic guidebook. And the stakes were incredibly high. The difference between a life-saving haven and a desolate trap could depend on your ability to interpret these subtle clues. The famous Kon-Tiki expedition, led by Thor Heyerdahl, demonstrated the possibilities of transoceanic voyages using only traditional methods. While some of Heyerdahl's theories remain controversial, historians still argue about the extent of pre-Columbian contact between South America and Polynesia. The expedition undeniably showcased the ingenuity and resourcefulness of ancient navigators. He built his raft out of balsa wood, based on the records of Incan vessels, and proved you could indeed drift from Peru to Polynesia. Now, I'm not saying I'd recommend it for your next vacation. But it was quite a feat. And it wasn't just about survival. The discovery of new lands often led to the introduction of new species, both intentionally and unintentionally. Plants and animals were transported across oceans, transforming ecosystems and altering the course of human history. The spread of Polynesian rats across the Pacific, for example, had a significant impact on the native bird populations of many islands. It wasn't always a happy story, but it was certainly a transformative one. Today, we have satellites that can map the ocean floor with incredible precision, weather forecasting models that can predict storms weeks in advance, and GPS technology that can pinpoint our location to within a few feet. We've lost that intimate connection to the natural world that guided early navigators. We're too busy doom-scrolling on our phones to notice that the pigeon on the windowsill might be trying to tell us something. Okay, it's probably just looking for breadcrumbs. But there's something deeply inspiring about the way these early explorers navigated the world. They didn't have fancy technology or detailed charts. They had their wits, their knowledge, and their connection to the rhythms of the ocean. They read the language of the wind and the waves, the flight of birds, and the drift of seaweed. They were masters of observation, interpretation, and adaptation. They were true pioneers, pushing the boundaries of human exploration and understanding. And they did it all with the help of a few well-placed fronds and feathers. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's dim the lights a bit, shall we? Maybe grab a warm drink, chamomile, perhaps. Today, we're going to drift among the stars, but not with telescopes or calculations. We're going to navigate by stories. Polynesian stories. You trudge through the warm, black sand. The air is thick with the scent of plumeria and salt. Above you, the Milky Way spills across the sky like powdered sugar on velvet. It's real here, palpable. Forget the light-polluted skies you're probably used to, this is the canvas upon which generations of navigators painted their maps. Feel the gentle trade wind whispering secrets in your ear, secrets carried across vast oceans, secrets woven into the constellations. You see, for the Polynesians, the stars weren't just distant balls of gas and plasma, like something from a science textbook. They were living beings, ancestors, gods, and heroes, all playing out eternal dramas in the inky blackness. Imagine learning your geography not from a map on the wall, but from a cosmic play performed nightly above your head. Makes that pop quiz in 6th grade seem a little trivial, doesn't it? Like, name the capital of Nebraska. Who cares when you can name the celestial canoe of Tawiramadia, the god of storms? Now, picture this, you're a young apprentice navigator, maybe 10 years old, sitting at the feet of your grandfather. He's pointing to a specific cluster of stars. Maybe it's what we now call the Pleiades. He doesn't say, oh, that's the Pleiades, a star cluster about 444 light-years away. No. He tells you the story of the 7 sisters, fleeing the amorous advances of a powerful warrior. Each rising and setting of these stars marks a change in the seasons. Imagine being able to read the year from the sky. And here's a fun fact for you, the Polynesians weren't just passive observers of the stars. They believed they could influence them. Chants, rituals, and offerings were all part of maintaining the cosmic balance. It's like having a celestial remote control. Although, I bet the warranty was a pain to deal with. You feel the sand cool beneath your feet as you walk further along the beach. Listen to the rhythmic crash of the waves. It's a constant reminder of the power of the ocean, the same ocean that these incredible navigators traversed with only their knowledge of the stars, the currents, and the swells. Think about that for a second. No GPS. No radar. Just pure, unadulterated skill and a deep connection to the natural world. Makes you feel a little inadequate about your own navigation skills, doesn't it? Especially if you're anything like me and still get lost using Google Maps. Now, let's talk about Maui. Ah, Maui, the ultimate trickster, demigod, and all-around cultural hero. He's a bit like the Polynesian version of Loki, but with slightly better PR. He fished up islands from the bottom of the sea with his magical fishhook, slowed down the sun, and even tried to trick death itself. Talk about overachieving. According to legend, Maui's fishhook is represented in the sky by the constellation Scorpius. See that bright, curved pattern of stars? That's Maui's hook, still pulling up the islands, even now. And here's a quirky little tidbit for you, in some Polynesian traditions, Maui didn't just slow down the sun, he beat it into submission with a jawbone. Imagine trying to argue with the sun after that encounter. I mean, talk about a bad day at the office. Historians still argue whether the stories of Maui are purely mythological or if they are based on a real historical figure. Maybe he was a particularly skilled navigator or a charismatic leader whose exploits became exaggerated over time. Whatever the truth, his stories continue to inspire and entertain. You pause, breathing in the humid air. The Southern Cross hangs low on the horizon, a beacon in the night sky. This constellation was incredibly important to Polynesian navigators. It points almost directly south, offering a reliable reference point in the vast expanse of the ocean. It's their compass, their guide, well, you get the idea. You might think navigating by the stars is all about knowing the constellations, right? Like memorizing a celestial roadmap. But it's so much more than that. It's about understanding the relationships between the stars, the rising and setting points on the horizon, and the subtle changes in the ocean currents. It's about feeling the rhythm of the sea and the pulse of the sky. It's about knowing your place in the universe, both literally and figuratively. For instance, they used wave patterns to determine their location. Swells created by distant islands travel for hundreds, even thousands, of miles. Skilled navigators could feel these swells, sense their direction, and use them to pinpoint the location of unseen lands. Seriously, that's mind-blowing. I can barely tell the difference between a rogue wave and a ripple. And speaking of skills, ever heard of star compasses? These weren't actual physical compasses with a needle pointing north. Instead, they were conceptual frameworks, dividing the horizon into segments, each associated with a specific star or constellation. Navigators memorized these star compasses, allowing them to maintain a consistent course, even when clouds obscured the stars. It's like having an internal GPS, only powered by pure brainpower and a lifetime of training. Makes you wonder what other incredible abilities we might unlock if we truly dedicated ourselves to understanding the natural world, doesn't it? Here's another quirky fact: Polynesian navigators sometimes carried live birds on their voyages. These birds, particularly frigate birds, have a knack for finding land. They would release the birds and follow them, trusting their instincts to lead them to the nearest island. It's like having a feathered GPS. Though, I hope they remembered to pack birdseed. That would be an awkward conversation. Historians still argue whether these long voyages were intentional or accidental. Did the Polynesians deliberately set out to explore new lands, or were they simply blown off course by storms? While accidental voyages likely occurred, the overwhelming evidence suggests that these were planned expeditions. The construction of sophisticated sailing canoes, the careful observation of celestial patterns, and the transmission of navigational knowledge across generations all point to a deliberate strategy of exploration. You walk further, the sound of the waves a constant lullaby. Imagine the courage it took to set sail into the unknown, armed with nothing but your knowledge, your skills, and your faith in the stories of your ancestors. These weren't just voyages, they were acts of incredible daring, fueled by a thirst for discovery and a deep connection to the ocean and the stars. My idea of daring is ordering the spiciest thing on the menu, so yeah. Respect. Let me tell you about Hockulay. Hockulay is a replica of a traditional Polynesian double-hulled voyaging canoe. In 1976, it completed a voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti, navigating solely by traditional methods. No modern instruments were used. The crew relied on the stars, the swells, the birds, and their own deep understanding of the ocean. This voyage was a powerful reminder of the ingenuity and skill of the Polynesian navigators and helped to revitalize traditional wayfinding practices. And here's a little-known fact: during that voyage, the crew of Hockulay faced skepticism from some who doubted the ability of traditional navigation methods to successfully complete the journey. But they proved the doubters wrong, demonstrating the enduring power of Polynesian knowledge. Take that, haters. Historians still debate the extent to which Polynesian voyages influenced the development of other cultures in the Pacific and beyond. There is evidence of cultural exchange between Polynesia and South America, suggesting that Polynesian voyagers may have reached the coasts of the Americas long before Europeans. The possibility of pre-Columbian contact between Polynesia and the Americas is a fascinating area of research that continues to challenge our understanding of history. So, as you stand there, beneath the vast expanse of the starry sky, take a moment to appreciate the incredible legacy of the Polynesian navigators. Their stories are written in the stars, whispered on the wind, and carried on the waves. They remind us that true navigation isn't just about knowing where you are, it's about knowing who you are and where you come from. Now if you'll excuse me, I think I'm going to go try and figure out where I parked my car. You know, because my navigational skills aren't exactly up to par. Alright, settle in, grab your favorite comfy blanket, and let's drift away on a gentle ocean breeze to the islands of Polynesia. Picture this, you're lying on a white sand beach, the turquoise water lapping at your toes, the sun warming your skin. The air is thick with the scent of frangipani, and the rhythmic crash of waves lulls you into a state of pure bliss. This isn't just a vacation, it's a gateway to understanding a culture deeply intertwined with the sea. A culture forged by incredible voyages across vast, open stretches of water. For centuries, the Polynesians, those master navigators of the Pacific, explored and settled a vast triangle stretching from Hawaii in the north, to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, in the east, and down to Aotearoa, New Zealand, in the south. You see, it wasn't just about finding new land, it was about survival, expansion, and a relentless spirit of adventure. These weren't accidental discoveries, mind you. These voyages were meticulously planned, executed with remarkable precision, and guided by an intricate knowledge of the natural world. Imagine sailing for weeks, sometimes months, relying solely on the stars, the currents, the flight patterns of birds, and the subtle swells of the ocean. No GPS, no fancy instruments, just pure, unadulterated skill and a deep connection to the elements. You'd have to really trust your team to get on board with that. And it wasn't just men out there doing all the work. Polynesian women played critical roles in these voyages, contributing their skills in weaving sails, preparing food for long journeys, and even sometimes serving as navigators themselves. Sadly, their contributions are often overlooked in historical accounts, surprise, surprise. But that's another story, isn't it? It's important to remember that these voyages were a communal effort, a testament to the power of collaboration and shared knowledge. Now, think about what it takes to embark on such a journey. First, you need the vessels. These weren't just any boats, they were magnificent double-hulled canoes, some capable of carrying dozens of people, along with supplies, animals, and plants. Imagine the ingenuity involved in constructing these vessels using only natural materials like wood, coconut fiber, and pandanus leaves. Think of the intricate weaving, the precise carving, the sheer amount of labor required. It's enough to make you want to just stay home and order takeout. Historians still argue whether these canoes were primarily sailed or paddled, but one thing is certain, they were marvels of engineering for their time. But it wasn't enough to just build a boat, you needed to know where you were going. This is where Polynesian navigation truly shines. They developed a sophisticated system of wayfinding that involved memorizing star patterns, observing wave patterns, understanding wind directions, and even smelling the air for clues about nearby islands. Seriously, smelling the air. Can you imagine trying that today? Honey, does the air smell like Maui? The Polynesian Voyaging Society, in recent times, has revived these ancient techniques, proving their accuracy and demonstrating the incredible knowledge possessed by these early navigators. They even successfully sailed a traditional double-hulled canoe, the Hakule, around the world using only traditional methods. Pretty impressive, right? Now, consider how this incredible mastery of navigation shaped Polynesian culture and identity. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was about forging a deep connection to the ocean and the cosmos. The sea became an integral part of their worldview, a source of sustenance, a highway for exploration, and a powerful force to be respected. Navigational knowledge was passed down through generations in the form of oral traditions, songs, and dances. These weren't just stories, they were living maps, encoded with vital information about currents, winds, and star positions. Imagine trying to memorize all that without a textbook. The ability to navigate also fostered a strong sense of community and cooperation. Building and maintaining canoes required collective effort. Voyages demanded teamwork and reliance on one another. And the successful settlement of new islands involved establishing social structures and systems of resource management. This emphasis on community is still a defining characteristic of Polynesian culture today. They say it takes a village. Well, it certainly took one to cross the Pacific. Furthermore, navigation shaped their spiritual beliefs. The stars, the sea, and the wind were not just natural phenomena, they were imbued with spiritual significance. Polynesian mythology is filled with stories of gods and goddesses who controlled the elements and guided the voyages of their ancestors. Navigation was, therefore, not just a practical skill, it was a sacred practice, a way of connecting with the divine. You can almost hear the ancient chants echoing across the water as the canoes set sail. The act of exploration and settlement also played a crucial role in shaping their sense of identity. Each island became a home, a place to build a new life, to cultivate the land, and to develop unique cultural traditions. But the memory of their ancestral voyages remained strong, connecting them to a larger Polynesian community. They knew they were not isolated, they were part of a vast network of islands linked by the ocean. Now, here's a quirky tidbit for you. Did you know that some historians believe that Polynesians may have even reached South America long before Europeans? There's evidence of sweet potatoes, a South American crop, being present in Polynesia before European contact. And some linguistic and genetic studies suggest connections between Polynesian and South American cultures. This is where things get really interesting, isn't it? Imagine those Polynesians showing up on the shores of South America, trading tips on sailing and sharing stories of their island homes. Now that's what I call a cultural exchange program. But the story doesn't end there. European contact brought significant changes to Polynesian society. Traditional navigational practices were gradually replaced by Western methods. Indigenous knowledge was often dismissed or suppressed. And the introduction of new diseases and technologies had a devastating impact on Polynesian populations. It's a sad chapter in history, one that serves as a reminder of the importance of preserving cultural heritage. And while we're on the topic of sad things, why did the canoe break up with the paddle? They just couldn't agree on anything. Despite the challenges of colonization, Polynesian culture has persevered. There's been a resurgence of interest in traditional navigation, and efforts are being made to revitalize indigenous languages and cultural practices. The legacy of those intrepid voyagers lives on in the hearts and minds of Polynesians today. It's a reminder of their resilience, their ingenuity, and their deep connection to the sea. Historians still debate the precise routes and motivations of these early voyages, but their impact on Polynesian culture and identity is undeniable. Today, as you look out at the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, remember the Polynesians who dared to explore its depths, guided by the stars, the waves, and a profound sense of adventure. Their story is a testament to the power of human ingenuity, the importance of cultural heritage, and the enduring connection between people and the sea. And when you're looking up at the stars tonight, maybe you'll catch a glimpse of those ancient navigators, still sailing the celestial seas. It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? And it's a reminder that even in our modern world, we can still learn from the wisdom of the past. I think I'll start by taking a long nap. Just like my ancestors. And one last thing. Why did the seaman name his parrot Cargo? Because he kept repeating everything he said. Now you can't say I didn't warn you about the jokes. Alright, settle in, grab your favorite beverage, maybe a cozy blanket, because we're about to embark on a journey across the vast oceans of history, and maybe doze off a little bit along the way. We're going to compare the almost unbelievably sophisticated navigation techniques of the ancient Polynesians with how other cultures managed to not fall off the edge of the world. Imagine yourself aboard a double-hulled voyaging canoe, way out in the middle of the Pacific. Just you, the endless blue, and the rhythmic creaks of the vessel. You feel the gentle rocking, the salty spray on your face, and the sun beating down. The air is thick with the scent of the ocean, a primal aroma that speaks of adventure and, well, probably a little bit of seasickness. This isn't your average cruise ship buffet experience, that's for sure. Now, you're relying solely on your navigator, who is basically a human GPS, but fueled by coconuts and ancestral knowledge instead of satellites. He's observing the waves, feeling the subtle swells with his whole body, not just glancing at them like some beach bum. He can tell the direction and distance to distant islands by the way the waves refract around them, a skill honed over generations. It's like reading the ocean's diary. He's also watching the stars, of course. Not just picking out pretty constellations, but knowing exactly where each star will be at a particular time of year, from any point in the Pacific. He's got a mental star compass, constantly updating his position. It's like having the entire night sky memorized, but way cooler than knowing all the Pokemon. And, oh yeah, there are no maps. Everything is in his head. Think about it. No compass, no charts, no sextants, no GPS, just intense observation, a deep understanding of natural phenomena, and a whole lot of guts. These guys were essentially sailing into the unknown armed with nothing but their brains and the blessings of the gods. That's impressive, unless the gods were having an off day, in which case, good luck. Polynesian navigators also paid incredibly close attention to bird flight patterns. They knew which birds flew where, and at what times of the day, and how that could indicate the presence of land. It's like having a feathered taxi service, except the taxi doesn't charge extra for luggage, or for suddenly dropping you into the ocean. And then there were the currents. They understood the intricate network of ocean currents, using them like highways to speed up their voyages. Can you imagine knowing the ocean so intimately that you could predict its movements with such precision? These guys were, like, next-level ocean whisperers. Historians still argue whether their navigational feats were primarily due to meticulously accumulated knowledge passed down through generations, or if a significant amount of it was intuitive and perhaps even spiritual. Now, let's contrast that with some other seafaring cultures. Take the Vikings, for example. You might picture them as bloodthirsty raiders, and, well, some of them probably were. But they were also skilled navigators. They sailed across the North Atlantic in longships, which were incredibly seaworthy vessels, but their navigation methods were a bit more rudimentary. They used the sun compass, a wooden disc with markings that helped them determine direction based on the sun's position. They also used something called a sunstone, a crystal that supposedly could reveal the sun's location even on cloudy days. It's a little like having a magical weather app. How well did the sunstone work? Well, let's just say that sometimes those Vikings ended up in Iceland when they were aiming for Greenland. It wasn't always precise. Still, you have to admire their bravery, or their recklessness, depending on your perspective. Then there were the Arabs, who were also master mariners. They developed the kamal, a simple instrument used to measure the altitude of stars. You'd hold a string with a rectangular piece of wood attached to it at arm's length, and adjust the wood until it aligned with the horizon and a particular star. The length of the string then indicated your latitude. It was a relatively accurate method, and it helped them navigate across the Indian Ocean and beyond. It was, in essence, the ancient world's version of staring intently at a ruler held very close to your face. They also made significant advancements in cartography, creating detailed maps that were used for centuries. One famous Arab navigator, Ahmad ibn Majid, is even rumored to have helped Vasco da Gama find his way to India, though that claim is still debated among historians. Think about the Chinese, too. They invented the magnetic compass, which was a game-changer for navigation. It allowed sailors to determine direction even when the sun and stars were hidden. They also built massive treasure ships during the Ming dynasty, under the command of Admiral Zheng He. These ships were gigantic, much larger than anything Europeans were building at the time, and they sailed all the way to Africa and back. It was a huge display of power and technological prowess, which they then abruptly stopped. Why? That's a whole other story, filled with court intrigue and political maneuvering. Apparently, somebody decided that exploring the world was less important than something else. Bureaucracy, probably. European navigation evolved over time, from relatively basic methods to more sophisticated techniques. Early European sailors relied heavily on dead reckoning, which involved estimating their position based on their speed, course, and time traveled. It's like playing a really complicated guessing game with the ocean. As you might imagine, it wasn't always accurate. The development of the astrolabe and the sextant allowed European sailors to measure the altitude of celestial bodies with greater precision, which in turn allowed them to determine their latitude more accurately. It's an important distinction: latitude is easy, longitude is hard. These instruments, combined with improved maps and navigational charts, helped pave the way for the age of exploration. Still, for centuries European mariners were spooked silly by the idea that boiling water would not cook beans at the equator, and spent much time and energy fretting about this, which, incidentally, is complete nonsense. Now, while these other cultures made significant contributions to navigation, there's something truly remarkable about the Polynesian achievement. They didn't rely on complex instruments or detailed maps. They relied on their senses, their knowledge of the natural world, and their connection to their ancestors. It was a holistic approach, a way of navigating that was deeply intertwined with their culture and their identity. You see, Polynesian navigation wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about maintaining a connection to the past, preserving traditions, and exploring the limits of human potential. It was about proving that you can navigate the world with your mind and your spirit as much as with tools and technology. In their epic voyages of discovery, the ancient Polynesians proved that the ocean was not a barrier, but a bridge. A bridge across which they carried their culture, their knowledge, and their dreams. And that, my friends, is truly something special. I mean, I get lost trying to navigate the grocery store, so the fact that they sailed thousands of miles with no instruments is just mind-boggling. So, next time you're feeling a little lost, remember the Polynesians. Remember their courage, their ingenuity, and their deep connection to the natural world. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find your way back to where you need to be. Or at least to the checkout line with the shortest wait time. Alright, settle in, friend. Get comfy. We're diving deep tonight, deeper than any Polynesian double-hulled canoe ever sailed, that's for sure. We're talking about legacy. Enduring influence. And specifically, the sheer audacity of Polynesian navigation and its ripple effects on, well, basically everything maritime. Imagine, you're standing on a black sand beach, the warm trade winds are whispering secrets in your ear, and before you, stretches, nothing. Just endless blue. No GPS. No sextant. Just you, the stars, the waves, and a deep-seated knowledge passed down through generations. Now, most of us would probably be thinking, nope. Nope, nope, nope. I'm good. Beach nap time. But not these guys. They were like, challenge accepted. And then they proceeded to explore and settle an area larger than all of Europe, which, frankly, is just showing off. Think about it, these weren't just accidental drift voyages. They were deliberate, planned expeditions, covering thousands of miles of open ocean. They used wave patterns, noticing how they bent around islands hundreds of miles away, the subtle temperature changes in the water, the flight paths of birds heading home to land in the evenings. It's like they were reading a book written in the language of the sea itself. Did they also have exceptional memories? Absolutely. They committed star charts, wave patterns, and ecological signatures to memory. All to survive. And if you think you have trouble remembering where you put your keys, try remembering the location of a tiny, uninhabited atoll after weeks at sea. Now, mainstream historical fact number 1 for you. Polynesian navigation is widely considered one of the most remarkable feats of seamanship in human history. That's not hyperbole, that's just cold, hard fact. These weren't just lucky voyages as some early Western scholars condescendingly suggested. There's clear evidence of sophisticated navigational techniques. They even used star compasses, imagine that, memorizing the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. They had a mental map of the Pacific, and they could navigate by the sun, moon, and stars. Quirky fact, some researchers even believe that the Polynesians may have used sophisticated forms of celestial navigation involving complex mathematical calculations, even without a written language. The debate goes on about the exact level of sophistication, but the very suggestion that they were doing advanced trigonometry on the open ocean is enough to make your head spin, right? I mean, I can barely balance my checkbook, and I have a calculator. Historians still argue whether Polynesian contact with South America predates European arrival. There is sweet potato DNA that has been found in Polynesia dating back to well before Columbus, which is pretty compelling evidence. So, did they sail all the way to South America and back? Or did South Americans make it to Polynesia? The jury is still out, and I swear, if I hear one more argument about sweet potato origins, I'm going to make sweet potato fries. And eat them while I ponder the mysteries of the universe, probably. Consider the double-hulled canoe. It's a marvel of engineering, really. These were not just dugout logs precariously lashed together. They were carefully designed vessels, capable of carrying dozens of people, along with supplies, plants, and even animals across vast stretches of ocean. The hulls were often asymmetrical to improve stability and handling in different sea conditions. It's essentially the catamaran of the ancient world, but way cooler. They were also master boat builders. Polynesians carefully selected the types of wood that they used for each part of the canoe, and this was not accidental. They would observe for generations which woods were buoyant enough, were strong enough, could resist saltwater rot and infestations. You can't go down to Home Depot to ask for suggestions. Trial and error was the only way. Speaking of materials, here's a slightly offbeat observation: think about the ropes they used. Braided from coconut fiber, or knit, these ropes were incredibly strong and durable. Now, coconut fiber rope might not sound particularly high-tech, but it was absolutely essential for connecting the different parts of the boat, and they could withstand the stresses of ocean travel. I'm pretty sure it's stronger than my attempts at crafting with yarn during the pandemic. My cats, for one, think it's stronger than yarn. The legacy of Polynesian navigation extends far beyond just the act of exploration. It's about a mindset, a worldview, a deep connection to the natural world. It's about understanding the interconnectedness of everything, from the stars above to the currents below. It's about resilience, resourcefulness, and the unwavering belief in your ability to overcome any challenge. Now, here's another mainstream historical fact: Polynesian navigational techniques were largely dismissed or misunderstood by Western explorers for centuries. They just couldn't fathom how these primitive people could possibly navigate such vast distances without the aid of European technology. It's a classic case of Eurocentric bias, where anything outside of the Western world is automatically deemed inferior. It took the work of dedicated scholars and, crucially, the revival of traditional navigation by people like Pielug to finally set the record straight. The sheer audacity of the Polynesians also influenced our sense of cartography. The Polynesians didn't perceive space the way that we do. Their mental maps were not just visual. They combined empirical observation with a highly abstract oral tradition. And the concept of wayfinding wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about maintaining a relationship with the environment, about understanding your place in the cosmos. In other words, it was about a whole lot more than just a list of coordinates on a map. It was a holistic approach that integrated science, spirituality, and lived experience. Quirky tidbit: some Polynesian cultures even had specific chants and songs that were used to memorize navigational information. Imagine trying to remember the coordinates of a distant island by singing a catchy tune. It's like a nautical version of Schoolhouse Rock. But instead of learning about conjunctions, you're learning about currents and star patterns. Historians still debate the full extent of Polynesian influence on other maritime cultures. Did their techniques spread to other parts of the world? Did they influence the development of navigation in other regions? It's a difficult question to answer definitively, but the possibility is certainly intriguing. And it forces us to consider the interconnectedness of human history and the potential for cultural exchange across vast distances. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Polynesian navigation is its influence on modern voyaging. The revival of traditional navigation techniques has not only helped to reconnect Polynesian communities with their heritage, but it has also inspired a new generation of explorers and seafarers. The Hokule, a replica of a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, has sailed around the world using only traditional navigation methods, proving that these ancient techniques are still viable in the 21st century. Here's a mainstream historical fact: the Hokule voyage was a watershed moment. It demonstrated that Polynesian navigation was not just a relic of the past, but a living, breathing tradition with the power to inspire and transform. The voyage reignited a sense of pride and cultural identity within Polynesian communities, and it also raised awareness of the importance of preserving traditional knowledge. And the journey of Hokule wasn't just about nostalgia. It's also about sustainability. Traditional Polynesian navigation is inherently sustainable, relying on renewable resources and a deep understanding of the natural world. In a world facing climate change and environmental degradation, there's a lot we can learn from the ancient wisdom of the Polynesians. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, think about the Polynesians. Think about their incredible voyages, their deep connection to the sea, and their enduring legacy on maritime history. And next time you look up at the stars, remember that there was a time when people used those stars to navigate across vast oceans, guided by nothing more than their knowledge, their courage, and their unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. Okay, friend, let's wind it down a bit now. The waves are gently lapping against the shore. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of salt and plumeria. The stars, they're like tiny diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth. Picture yourself drifting on that gentle current, the moon casting a silvery path across the water. The sounds are soft, almost whispers, the rustle of palm leaves, the distant cry of a seabird, the gentle rhythm of the ocean breathing. Let your mind go still. Let the day's worries just dissolve. Imagine yourself as one of those ancient voyagers, connected to the sea, the sky, the wind. Feel the confidence in your path, the unwavering sense of belonging. There is a deep peace in this, you know. The world seems smaller, less daunting when you realize how interconnected everything truly is. Breathe deep. And rest easy, my friend. Sweet dreams.